We'll call this Senate Minerals Committee to order. We have three bills before us today. We've moved some of them around per the maker's request. If you're here to hear about Senate File 134 or 97, they'll both be on Friday to hear on Friday. Okay. Sorry about that. See you on Friday.
I'm sorry, 97 has to be today,
Oh.
the senator case is right there.
Oh, what's it, 92 that moved to Friday? 92 moved to Friday, not 97. No, I don't think he wants to hear that, does he?
Yeah, Joey was 97.
Oh. Okay. Certainly. Sorry about that. So Senate File 97, trust code revisions.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Case.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, this bill is brought by the Wyoming Trust Association. Just by way of a little background, Wyoming has grown to be a very important state for folks to form their trusts and have the production of Wyoming laws within our trust code and our chancery court. There is quite a industry around people that advise folks on their trust, their placement of their wealth assets in trust. And we've had several bills in the past few years dealing with trust. We've rewritten our trust code on a couple occasions. We have a very good body of law, and we can be very proud of it, actually. And we're talking about some of the wealthiest people in the world that wish to protect their assets, use it for benevolent, pass it on to their children, and trusts are a part of that. And so this is a revision to the trust code. I'm not going to give you the blow-by-blow, but to say that I think Ms. Lee, and we have a witness online who'd be able to do that and give you really the blow-by-blow. But as we go through it very quickly, really there's kind of 5 different things that this bill does. The first 4 are just clarification and cleanup. And I actually do have a little guide that I could pass out to you guys. Let me, we have extras. There'll be some extras in that bunch for people in the audience. So, Mr. Chairman, within the range of clarification and cleanup, I'm going to go through the list without connecting it to the bill. But we have a definition of a qualified trustee. The first change is to clarify that one, but not all the enumerated activities in a list are required. And you find that on page 2, under Romanet, under A, Romanet 35, and then B, and you can see the new language on line 13, that conducts one or more of the following activities. And so the change in part 2, which is the next paragraph, is to clarify that the limitation on the settler's authority extends to indirect roles consistent with limitations on the settler's authority to serve as a qualified trustee of a Wyoming qualified spendthrift trust. That's a mouthful. I think the most important piece of that, Mr. Chairman, is the settler is the person that actually creates a trust. So the new language, either directly or neither the settler, either directly or indirectly through an entity, unless discretionary distributions by the entity require the consent or approval of one or more disinterested persons who are not a related or subordinate party with respect to the settler within the meaning of the U.S. Code 26 U.S.C. 672C. The next change, Mr. Chairman, is on page 3, line 6. little e says, for any judicial action or proceeding concerning a trust under this act, notice shall only be required to be provided to interested persons as defined in WS 410-201D. And you don't have to, it limits notice to the people that would need to get the notice, Mr. Chairman. The next is in 410-410. Sounds like a pretty good shotgun to me. Page 3, line 11. Romanet 4, under A, it says, no common law rule limiting the duration or non-charitable purpose trust is enforced in this state, and no common law rule of perpetuities that is otherwise enforced in this state shall apply to non-charitable purpose trusts. I don't know, it's been a while since we've had a good discussion about perpetuities in the Wyoming Senate. I think when April Bremer Coons was here, we had a lot of them. Yeah, it's like forever. So those are all they're mostly cleanup and clarification, and we'll have more on that from our witness. But the substantive change, and you're going to see why it's substantive, is on page 4 under Romanet. Well, it's an insertion that begins on line 13. So you can see that this is a list, and we'll start at A. Without limiting the authority conferred by WS 410-815, a trustee may, and we have a whole list of things, okay? And it's a long list. And you can see that we have Romanet 31 and Romanet 32 are in your bill for you. We're adding a new Romanet 33, and this is substantial, but let me talk about it in concept first. Sometimes people owe taxes, and maybe you created a trust, and for some reason there's no other way, but you have a tax consequence of some action that comes back to you, but you've given the money away in trust. So this would allow the trustee to make a payment to you so you can pay the taxes, or alternatively, pay the taxes for you. It's going to be an important tool, and you can see there'll be examples that will be provided about how that'll be used. But so it's kind of a mouthful, but it says, except as otherwise provided under this paragraph or under the terms of a trust, if all or any portion of the trust is treated as being owned by a person under 26 U.S.C. 671, or any similar federal, state, or other tax law, the trustee may, in the trustee's sole discretion, reimburse or pay on behalf of the person being treated as the owner, for tax purposes, you guys, any amount of the person's personal, federal, state, or other income tax liability that is attributable to the inclusion of the trust's income, capital gains, deductions, or credits in the calculation of the person's taxable income. It says when this paragraph doesn't apply, it shall not apply to a trustee who is the settler. That's the person that creates the trust, or a person who is related or a subordinate party to the settler within the meaning of another 26 U.S.C. 672. Neither the power authorized under this paragraph or the exercise of the power under this paragraph shall cause the settler, person making the trust, to be treated as a beneficiary of the trust. It's directly what they're trying not to be. They're not the beneficiary. The trust property to be included in the state of the settler or otherwise entitle a creditor of the settler to compel, attach, or otherwise encumber a payment authorized under this paragraph. The provisions of this paragraph apply to all trusts governed by the laws of the state unless an independent trustee of the trust irrevocably elects otherwise in writing. So that's.
Question here.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, this reads as if person in this paragraph means natural person, and I see the reference to U.S. Code 671. Is this only applicable to a natural person, or does this apply to person as we statutorily construct a person?
I can see my partner here trying to hit the deal. I'm going to say it's only a natural person because that's the only person who make a trust, but I'm going to yield to Ms. Lee, and she'll say who she is.
Thank you, Senator Case. Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, we have an
Kristen
expert.
Lee.
I'm sorry, my name's Kristen Lee, and I represent the Wyoming Trust Association. Thank you. We have Mr. Scott Weaver, who is the trust officer of the private trust company, here today as our expert, and I think we would defer to him. Thank you.
I think that's a good plan, but that's basically, the last page is about the renumbering because we added a new Romanet 33. So that's the bill. There are people from the Trust Association. Mr. Scott Weaver would like the opportunity to testify to the committee. He's online.
Any questions for Senator? Yes, go ahead.
I guess two more. I'm assuming this is comporting with the Uniform Trust Code
Yes.
from the Uniform Law Commission, so all of this is consistent with that?
Well, I'm not going to be, trust law doesn't have the uniform conventions of things like, Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry,
Go
of
ahead.
like insurance law, for example. There is a bit of uniformity, and there's a Uniform Laws Commission that tries to help to keep things kind of in sync. But I would not say that we are necessarily seeking uniformity. We're seeking to hold Wyoming out to be kind of important place to make your trusts.
So, Mr. Chairman, following up on that point, so this differentiates us from how other states would do it then, is what you're suggesting?
I think that's possibly the case. Puts us kind of in the forefront, perhaps. But Mr. Weaver can better answer that. 'Cause
Okay.
I probably will mess it up.
And
This
the-
Mr. Weaver's got it all, doesn't he?
He does,
He does.
actually. Well, he does this for a living. You know what I do for a living.
And Mr. Chairman, last question, and maybe this is for Mr. Weaver also. This seems private trust, doesn't seem to affect our regulated trusts through the banking commission. It's all in Title IV instead of elsewhere. Is that accurate? This is for private trusts as opposed to regulated trusts? Supervised trusts?
Yeah, I'm going to defer, let's defer to Mr. Weaver on that.
Okay.
I think you're right, and it makes sense that you're right, but I'd rather defer to him.
All right, will do.
Really, I'm not much good for anything.
Any other questions for the senator or Kristen Lee? Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony. Thanks for being here. Sorry about the mix-up on your bill.
It's all right. I'm going to be next door if you need me. I'm back in revenue. I'm sure.
Maybe Mr. Weaver will call on you.
Casey.
He's looking good. He got a haircut. I can see that.
Kristen, you're going to go ahead and tell us some more? No?
No, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to introduce Mr. Weaver, but Mr. Scott Weaver's been introduced to the
We'll
board.
do
Thank
that
you.
after we hear
Thank
from
you, Mr. Chairman.
from the room. We'll go to Zoom. Anyone else in the room, any agencies like to speak on Senate File number 97? Any agencies? Any legislators like to speak on Senate File 97? No? Any public like to speak on Senate File 97? Oh, two jump up. Go ahead and state
Thank you,
your
Mr.
name.
Chairman, members of the committee, Scott Meyer on behalf of the Wyoming Bankers Association and our many community banks, especially those with trust departments. We stand in support of this bill. I think that there was a lot of discussion here, but maybe there's a lot of things that hopefully I can clear up or Mr. Weaver can clear up for you. But I'm also a member of the Uniform Laws Commission for the state of Wyoming. This, in answer a little bit to Senator Rothfuss's question, this is under a uniform act, and we are trying to do it, but like with so many uniform acts, Wyoming has its own cooking. This provision in here does allow us to, there are other states that have done this, but this allows us to say, look, not every attorney drafts these things in the way that they need to do it, and this provision says we are going to allow it by law. So the issue that Senator Case brought up about being able to have the taxes paid is important because it does allow us to distinguish. Now, there are other states that have done that as well. We just don't want to be out in the cold. And I think that those are the big things. I listened to him. If there's any other questions I might answer, I'm happy to do that. I know that Mr. Weaver's on the line as well and probably did more of the drafting, but we certainly stand in support of the bill.
All right, any questions? Any questions? Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for being here. Mr. Corriente, were you next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, Joey Corrini. I am the Executive Director of Rural Wyoming Matters. We are an educational, informational, and advocacy group in rural Wyoming. And please forgive me if my testimony seems like I took a perfunctory look, but this is outside of most people's realms, even in the banking industry and trust. But in rural Wyoming, we do have a series of regular needs that I'm not going to say is not being met by the state, but are currently problematic. Things like our ambulance services, search and rescue, fire operations. And what we've done, at least throughout South Central Wyoming, is we've started to set up nonprofits and not-for-profits that handle these kinds of situations. So we have the sheriff's office, but we have the nonprofit that does the search and rescue team. And a lot of the donations and support we get is from endowments and trusts. In fact, a lot of these things we're trying to structure is with the goal of one day having the entity be a trust itself. So I do like a lot of the components of this, even though I don't understand how they all connect. And I don't know what concerns or situations might come up when this bill is actually being worked or discussed on the floor. But for our interest in rural Wyoming and the direction we're trying to go to become self-sufficient, so the legislature doesn't have to actively say, no, one uniform funding model and policy and procedure for ambulance services across Wyoming. As long as the applicability that's clarified in the specific applicability section of 816, the accessibility that is increased in section 103B, and the strengthening of the accountability in section 109E, those three provisions are things that my group would really like to see stay there as we're attempting to engage in these types of self-sufficient future operations. The other thing is we do really like the fact that because we get a good portion of our current funding from trusts, that there is protections on the trust itself. If they do run into that tax problem, they're not going to say, you know what, we just can't be a trust anymore, or we're going to have to break the trust, or we're going to have to stop donating to you. And we could do reverse fundraising and say, hey, we'll get some money together because you've been keeping us chugging along, and we'll help you pay that tax burden. So not only on and for, but if I can, Mr. Chairman, I really relish the opportunity to be in full support of a bill brought by the prime sponsor, and I would love to see that possibly happen again. I'm sorry he's not in the room, but future rural Wyoming wind projects maybe, that might be a good one, but on and for and stand for any questions.
So, Mr. Corriente, you're thinking that it would be best to set it up as a trust as opposed to a nonprofit or something like that? That would work better for your entities?
Mr. Chairman, it's an option we want to keep open. We're just starting a lot of this stuff, and anything that clarifies current statute, increases accessibility and accountability. I don't think this is going to be a criminal or civil issue, so you don't have to really worry about enforceability. But you're broadening the understanding and application and the potential options that groups like mine will have in the future. You know, everybody starts with big ideas, and then the difference between a nonprofit, a not-for-profit, a public good, an actual 501c, whatever it ends up being. And someday you do hope to become self-sufficient. So because of where the money comes from in some of the cases we're dealing with right now, this is good policy if the language can be clarified to be palatable to a majority of both chambers. In the future, we would love to be a trust and help other people out, but rural Wyoming does have needs, but rural Wyoming also likes to be very self-sufficient. We like to keep the options on the table, and options that are clear, well-defined, and provide more accessibility, we're not going to argue against.
More questions for Mr. Corriente? More questions, more questions? No more questions, thank you. Sorry about the confusion on which bill that was. I'm sorry to make you run out of the room. Anybody else in the room that would like to speak on this bill? Anybody else in the room would like to speak on this bill? If not, we'll go to Zoom, and I think you have one person, Mr. Weaver, that is the magician on trust, I hear. Mr. Weaver, go ahead when you get ready. We've got big expectations of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Scott Weaver. I'm the General Counsel and Chief Fiduciary Officer at Willow Street. We're a trust and fiduciary services company up here in Jackson. I am formerly a director and now a member of the Legislative Committee for the Wyoming Trust Association, so I'm very glad to be here today. Also want to thank Senator Case for his sponsorship, and I hope that he didn't overpromise and set me up to underdeliver in terms of my expertise, but the Wyoming Trust Association obviously proposed these changes. We're in favor of them. And I think the senator did a nice job of previewing the cleanup changes. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you, I might speak directly to Senator Rothfuss's questions that address some of the technicalities of the proposed change.
Certainly, that'd be good.
Excellent. Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, thank you for the questions. The first question the senator asked was whether this is limited only to natural persons or if it also contemplates entities as the term might be defined. The notion of what constitutes a grantor of a trust is a federally defined term in Internal Revenue Code, and Section 671 through 679 of the Internal Revenue Code detail when a person could be deemed the quote-unquote owner of a trust for income tax purposes. So, Senator, the answer to your question is, under most circumstances, this would be a natural person. I decide I want to create a trust for my family, I contribute assets to it, and that trust is structured as a grantor trust, so I continue to pay the income tax for those assets during my lifetime. There might be a time where the tax bill is more than I would anticipate. Let's say, for example, I put my family ranch into that trust, thinking that my family is going to want to continue to operate that ranch for generations. Turns out down the line, we determine to sell, and there's a large capital gains tax bill that all of a sudden I owe. So normally, it would be an individual taxpayer. There are instances where instead of having a natural person create a trust, it could be an entity or another trust, significantly less common. Mr. Chairman, I'd entertain any questions on this first point, particularly from Senator Rothfuss.
Well, we'll just have Senator Rothfuss question you then.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Weaver, my only concern there, but I think it's probably taken care of by the language, is just that obviously when we use our statutory language, we use person to mean a natural person and an entity. Would it be better for us to comport with Wyoming statute and add natural in front of this person? Or would that actually cause confusion because person is defined in 26 USC 671 and natural person is not? I'm guessing we should probably leave it, but I'm just afraid that somebody might read that in our statutory context instead of in US code context, particularly since person is used several more times. So what are your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Rothfuss, as drafted is acceptable. Those terms are harmonized between the Uniform Trust Code and the term we mean in Wyoming, and as the term is used in the federal tax code. So in that instance, person should be read as responsible taxpayer, whether human or an entity.
Okay. All right. Thanks. And that's enough for that question. I know there's a couple more.
Yeah, certainly.
So would you suggest that we change that to some other wording then, or should we just leave it person?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest leaving it as person because it contemplates whoever the responsible taxpayer is, regardless of whether they're a natural human or an entity.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the second question was, is this harmonized with the Uniform Trust Code and are other states doing it? And on this point, Senator Case was correct that the Uniform Trust Code is a little different than some of the other uniform laws where each state has their own flavor on it. I happen to be a big fan of Wyoming's flavor. I think we've got it calibrated pretty much spot on. There are a few other states that have permitted this power. Of notable trust jurisdictions include Delaware, New Hampshire, and Florida. And the reason that we've suggested adding this provision to the Wyoming Uniform Trust Code has to do in part with the fact that it's a power that inconsistently exists in other states. So you might contemplate a trust that presently exists in Delaware, The family would like to move that trust to Wyoming, and the trust was drafted in reliance on the existence of this power in the Delaware trust laws. So then all of a sudden, the family moves the trust to Wyoming, where we find out that this power doesn't exist. And so it could be a reason the family wouldn't move the trust to Wyoming, or it could result in an unanticipated tax consequence. So what we're asking is to add this power for the purpose of consistency and flexibility. And you'll note that it is an entirely optional power for the trustee to exercise. It is not required, and it would be done so in the judgment of each fiduciary. And the other point I would make is that we are requesting this now directly in response to some guidance we received from the Internal Revenue Service at the end of 2023. Historically, you'll recall the Wyoming Uniform Trust Code is quite flexible and allows changes to be made to trusts. However, at the end of 2023, the IRS said, if you add this power to a trust, following our non-judicial settlement process, which involves all of the beneficiaries and interested persons to get together and agree, yes, indeed, this is a change we'd like to make to the trust. The IRS said the addition of this power by that process could be deemed as an additional taxable gift. What that means is that adding this power could actually have tax consequences to the beneficiaries. But what we know is that if it's a statutory power like what we've proposed here, and the trustee has the power to exercise that under default state law, it's not going to result in any additional tax consequence to the family. So this is really two parts. Number one is to build flexibility in for families that might wish to move their trust to Wyoming from another jurisdiction. And then part two is to address the fact that there may be existing Wyoming trusts where the family said, well, we can add this provision later if we want to, but now we found out from the IRS that that's not really within the art of the possible. And Mr. Chairman, I'd certainly entertain any questions on that portion of my testimony.
Questions on that portion? Questions on that portion? We're good.
Okay.
Mr. Weaver,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
was there any questions need to be addressed?
The final question is whether this applies to private versus regulated or supervised trusts. And Mr. Chairman, the answer is to all of the above. So the Wyoming Uniform Trust Code applies to all trusts that are governed by Wyoming law, regardless of whether the trustee is a natural Wyoming citizen or a chartered Wyoming trust company or an unsupervised Wyoming trust company. So this would apply to all Wyoming trusts equally without consideration as to who is exercising the power. The one caveat I would give there is that this particular power is limited only to those trustees that are not related or subordinate to the settlor, as the term is defined in the Internal Revenue Code. Related or subordinate basically means family members or employees. So if I create a trust and my wife is the trustee, she couldn't exercise this power because that would be problematic from a federal tax perspective. But as long as the trustee is not related or subordinate to me, then they have the power to exercise.
Okay, sure. Questions, Senator Rothfuss?
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. So our supervised family trusts then typically would not be eligible for this treatment. Is that accurate? Or are these are multi-generational, so maybe there are some nuances there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, thank you for the question. Our supervised family trust companies and so the chartered family trust company, that is one that is supervised by the Wyoming Division of Banking, as well as Wyoming single family private trust companies, those which are not supervised, would both be able to exercise this power so long as under federal law purposes, they would not be defined as related or subordinate. That analysis is driven by guidance from the Internal Revenue Code that I hesitate to mention by virtue of its complexity. But suffice to say, this is a question that whether an entity is related or subordinate, whether a natural person or an entity, is a question that's defined in the Internal Revenue Code and governed by federal law.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Weaver? He's got all the answers, so thank you, Mr. Weaver. I think you did have all the answers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
You bet. Hearing no other public comment, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Rothfuss, seconded by Jones. Any discussion, any changes, any amendments? Anything at all that you want to do to this bill? It's a good little bill. A good little bill. Let's do the roll call on this. Sue?
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 97. Senator Cooper,
Excuse.
Senator Jones, Senator Nethercott,
Excuse.
Senator Rothfuss,
Aye.
Chairman Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 3 ayes, 2 excused.
That bill squeaked by the Minerals Committee, and I heard Senator Case say he wanted to floor that, I think, didn't I? I agree. I think I heard that. All right, we'll put him down for the floor on that one. Next bill to come for us is Senate File 138, I believe. Yep. Senate File 138, Energy Impact on Wyoming Economy Study. And we have Senator Dockstader here to tell us about this. Please identify yourself and
Thank you.
tell us all about this.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dan Dockstader, Senate District 16. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I bring you Senate File 138, Energy Impact on Wyoming Economy Study. Members of the committee, and Mr. Chairman, this was generated actually by visiting a lot of different places related to minerals and energy in the state. Generated while I was touring Gillette mining operations with this committee actually taking the committee to different places around the state. We're sitting in the bottom of a coal mine, and I'm asking questions about jobs in the economy, jobs and payroll. Asked more about it from those who ship the loads of coal, the train loads of coal coming out of the east and the west, going across the state, going to distance afar. Asked about jobs, payroll, tax base. The topic that came up when I toured the potential rare earth operations in northeast Wyoming. What kind of jobs will this generate? What kind of payroll? What kind of tax base? And it was really brought to light one time when I invited our university's president out to the patch, the Trona patch. We sat down, had in-depth discussion and a tour, and the question came up time and again. How many jobs do we have out here? What kind of payroll? What does it mean to the regional economy? I took that basic information too, and with my colleague here from the southwestern part of the state that sits on your committee, and we traveled out to Washington, D.C. and made a presentation to the head of a federal agency. Everybody brought different talking points to that presentation, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, but my emphasis was on jobs, payroll, regional economy, what it does for that area of Wyoming. Also came up when I've taken people out to the tour of the natural gas reserves and the operations in the Jonah, place we called Chute Creek. And the Chute Creek operation, both here in a meeting in Cheyenne and then also on the site, one time I said, where do we stand with your operation? What does it mean annually to Southwest Wyoming? And they offered $100 million in payroll and taxes. Those things catch my attention. So that's what I'm doing with this bill. How many jobs, what's payroll, what's taxes? My intention that we kind of encompass it all into one bill. Senate File 138, call for the study, and members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, I'll just briefly go through the bill if that's all right. It's basically asking the Wyoming Energy Authority to complete the study on the economic impacts in the energy industry of Wyoming. I appreciate the Energy Authority doing this because this helps me avoid an appropriation or request for an appropriation. I didn't want to do that. Energy Authority opened that up, working with our School of Energy as well. I'll get to that in just a moment. Study requires assistance from state agencies, higher education institutions. That's where our university fits in. It's they'll study various types of mineral production, energy production, determine the impacts of each major region in the state, each individual type of energy and mineral, the amount of the state and local taxes that are generated by this. Over on page 3, measure of the amount of payroll. The economic benefits are noted, the highlights, tangible benefits, and any other information that will become possible through this study. Allows the Energy Authority to request assistance of any state agency or higher education institution in Wyoming. We've already had initial discussions with our School of Energy that they can step in and help us in so many ways here. We put the study date to be completed by October 1st, 2025. A job report coming back, or a report coming back to this committee that we could eventually use too. And my hope is that we can take this information and disseminate it and show just how much of an impact minerals, energy, all of it means to our state, not only across the state, but in each region. And we understand what it means to our local economies, to our local governments, to our schools, our university. I sense that we'll be astounded by this number, and I'd ask for your support of the bill, Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Dockstader. Any questions for Senator Dockstader? I have one question. It's obvious that on page 2, you asked for 5 years worth of information, and then on page 3, you asked for 10 years of information. And they're different types of information that you're asking for. Is there some reason to have 5 on one and 10 on the other?
Mr. Chairman, we could easily combine that. I can see your concern there and happy to do what's necessary to make sure we get a thorough study.
Okay. That state and local taxes for the last 5 years, that might be better to have a little more years on that,
Lengthy.
because there's quite a few
Would welcome it.
contributions in the past 10 years.
Mr. Chairman, would welcome an amendment there if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, okay. And the 10 years on the innovations is, I think that's fine. That goes back quite a ways on innovations. Any other questions for Senator Dockstader? Any other questions for Senator Dockstader? Hearing none, thank you, Senator Dockstader.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room like to testify?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Rob Krieger, Executive Director of the Energy Authority. Want to thank the bringer of the bill for working with us on this in the interim, looking at some of these things. When I looked at this bill at first, it kind of seemed like a no-brainer that we should be doing this. But as you all know, over the years, the Energy Authority has grown, right? We started very small, smallest in the country. We still hold that mantle, but we've grown a little bit. And I think we have the assets to cover this. And I think when looking at this bill too, and we had this discussion Friday at this committee about some of the work we've been doing, I think has been good work. Something we have not done well is really tell people what that work is and what that impact has been to the state. So I welcome this bill and look forward to doing this study. We're already heading down a road on doing an impact analysis on the energy matching funds by itself, because that's kind of a fund that not a lot of states, well, they do now, states are taking those on, but they didn't before. And then when the good bringer of the bill brought this up, I said, perfect, we can throw this in as well. And we have some resources on the team to be able to handle this, as he mentioned, without an appropriation. One thing I would just say, Mr. Chairman, to your question earlier about the 5 to 10 years, happy to do that. You know, the way I sort of read the bill is under, what would this be, on page 2 at the very top on line 2, it says at a minimum before we go into some of those things. So I think we could do a short term, a more recent look back, but is, to your point, a much further look back as well when we're talking jobs and revenues and sort of how these markets have changed too, because I think that's an important piece for the state to understand over the years, how people are getting their energy and what they're looking for. So overall, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a bill that we're happy to do and get you all this report in October.
Questions for Mr. Krieger? Questions for Mr. Krieger? So you're okay with a 10-year look back on the taxes and on the employees?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I am. The way I read it is at a minimum. So we could, I think when we do this, we should look, 5, 10, 15, keep bringing that back so folks can see these sort of ebbs and flows in those.
Okay, all right. All right, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on Senate File 138, Energy Impact on Wyoming Economy Study? Please identify yourself.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sean Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Rural Electric Association, representing the 15 rural electric distribution cooperatives across Wyoming, as well as our generation and transmission cooperatives. Standing in support of the bill, we've actually done a similar study from the co-op's perspective called Rooted in Community, which the last time we did this was about 3 years ago, provided the entire legislature with a copy of this, and it was maybe self-serving, but from our perspective, we wanted to get the point out that I believe Senator Dockstader wants to do about all energy impacts. And we did the study and we looked at our full-time employees, the indirect jobs created because of the co-ops in our communities, the total sales that we've had, payroll to employees, personal income generated, as well as some of the community benefits through capital credits, scholarships, property taxes paid, and some charitable what we call Roundup, Operation Roundup, where we ask our members to voluntarily round their utility bills up to the next dollar, and we contribute that money to whatever our communities need. So I think it's a good idea. I would just hope that the utilities, and in particular the co-ops, would be included in this study. Happy to work with Mr. Krieger on this, because we've already done this. We worked with the University of Wyoming when we did this study, as well as the Wyoming Business Council. And we just want to show the impact that our rural electric co-ops bring to the rural communities, as well as statewide. So on and in favor of the bill, and happy to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. I think the Mining Association does a lot of this kind of stuff too, but I think Senator Dockstader is putting it all in one place, which would really be good.
Agreed.
Other questions for Mr. Taylor? Other questions for Mr. Taylor? Hearing none, Mr. Taylor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and joining us.
You bet.
Anyone else in the room? Anyone else in the room on Senate File 138? Seeing none, and there's no one on Zoom. No one on Zoom, no one in the room. We'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? You want to move the bill? Move the bill. Move the bill. Moved by Cooper. Second. Second by Jones. And you have a comment.
Mr. Chairman, I was able to go on the track with Senator Dockstader to, fight against the federal government for some of our rights, and I agree completely with this bill. I think we have to prove what the impact is on some of these things and be able to justify why we're fighting so hard to keep some of these industries going.
Good. Other comments? Other comments? I think it's really good to pull all of them together, because you get the mining one, you get the electrician one, you get various ones, but really, and the Energy Authority is a great place to pull that together. So I think that's going to be really good. No other comments. I have an amendment I'd like to make. On page 2, line 19, I'd like to change that to 10 years. And on line 21, I'd like to change that 5 years to 10 years also. And I think Mr. Krieger makes a good point. It's a minimum. I think they could do more than that, but I think we for sure need to do 10 years on those two. So if there's a second, we'll talk about it. Second. Oh, it was seconded. All right. Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. That amendment has carried. You got that amendment, Sue? All right, okay. Anything else you guys would like to modify on this? If not, we'll have a roll call vote on this little bill. Senate File 138.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 138 as amended. Senator Cooper.
Aye.
Senator Jones. Aye. Senator Nethercott.
Excused.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Chairman Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that's 4 ayes, 1 excused.
Thank you. Who would like to take that on the floor?
Oh, that's sponsored.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, that's.
Oh, Dockstetter, yeah. Maybe he could take it on the floor. Yeah, we'll let him. We'll assign him to that floor duty. Thank you, Senator Dockstetter. Okay, the next bill to come before you today is Senate File 144, Wyoming Ireland Trade Commission. And I think there's somebody here to talk about it.
Top of the morning.
Yeah. Blarney Stone guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. I bring you Senate File 144, Wyoming Ireland Trade Commission, and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is actually a piece of model legislation, which I would normally not bring. This is 19 states. Ireland is a incredibly unknown force out there that has an incredible economy, and they have reached out to the United States and the state of Wyoming. As all of you that have been in the Senate know, I've sponsored Ireland cooperative type legislation for the last 12 years. Ireland reaches out, they want to be a trade partner, they want to find better ways to do it, and they figured it out. They've actually got it in these places. So what this is, we'll start on page 1, just kind of work through it, talk about what it does. Establishes the Wyoming Ireland Trade Commission. On it, when you take a look at it, we formed the commission membership, and this is kind of off the model, so it's open to change it, but this kind of follows what has worked in other places. 9 members of it. Two people from the governor's office, 2 from the House of Representatives, 2 of the Senate, 1 of the House appointed by minority floor leader, 1 of the Senate by the minority floor leader, 1 appointed by the board. This is pretty similar makeup to what we've done in some other boards around. Members selected by the governor of the board, public institution of higher education, Irish American community in Wyoming interested in furthering trade between Wyoming and Ireland, which I look up here, I'm proud to have you raise hands who all's got Irish roots. Rothfuss, you might not qualify, Senator Rothfuss. But other than that, it's most of America's got some roots to Ireland, interestingly enough. Wyoming industry engaged in or seeking to engage trade with Ireland. Wyoming Business Social Trade Organization, Economic Development Organization, Chamber of Commerce. And this is kind of gets into the nuts and bolts. So members who are not legislative members serve for 2-year terms. Legislative members serve for 2-year biennial legislative session. You have to be in. If you get defeated in an election or your term goes, they'll replace you. There's a process here for it. Terms begin March 1. Like I said, the vacancies come. Appointing authority for any member may remove the member without cause and substitute another appointee at any time. Just the way it's set up, if it's not working right, they can take care of it. Commission hold meetings not less than once each calendar quarter, 4 times a year. Meetings held at the call of the chairman, initial meeting of commission. Annually thereafter, the members select among 1 member as the chairman. Majority of the members constitute a quorum for business. Chairman may appoint from among the commission members, subcommittee, and subcommittee chairman. I'll break in just a little. These generally start pretty slow, they get pretty fast. Some of the countries got some pretty big deals going on. Clerical and administrative support furnished by the council, and then it goes into the non-legislative members and how they're funded and done. The funding, there is no ask for funding. We're taking it out of existing pots of money that we already have. And then we'll go to page 6 and we go into the purposes of it. Purpose of it, advance, promote, encourage business and other mutual beneficial activities to Wyoming and Ireland, bilateral trade, joint action on policy, business and academic exchanges, mutual economic support, mutual investment in respective infrastructure, other opportunities for mutual benefit, and then a reporting section, and then we go on to definitions. So that's kind of the bill. What's probably not known is virtually all of our major companies have major portals in Ireland. It's somewhat of a free trade zone into the EU because of the way it's structured. One that comes to mind here, and you guys will know some about it, Microsoft has an unbelievably major base in Ireland, as they do in Wyoming. And so we're looking for ways to economically enhance Wyoming. using our doors to Irish business. They've openly reached out to us to be able to leverage and do this for both of us. It's one of these deals, it's pretty painless, but it has potential really good rewards for the state of Wyoming. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Questions for the presenter? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Driscoll, on page 5, line 8, necessary clerical and administrative support for the commission shall be furnished by the council. We didn't really go into any detail about what council and what support would be provided, so could you provide a little context on the council there?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yes, the council is what comes in on, I believe, page 2 or so. It's appointed, and generally what these will do is they'll secretary themselves. It's just, these meetings are going to be pretty small. So the council is commission. I guess I did council and commission. We probably need amendment because it's, you're correct. Good catch. Commission to council.
I had that down too. And you're saying it should be the commission?
Yeah, it's the commission. And the commission, commission or council, it could be either one you want to have it as. But they're both the same. And, really, they're almost to start with, what you're going to find is Ireland's probably going to send somebody to these meetings as a rep, which is kind of interesting. They're going to sit down there and talk about different areas we can do. Those quarterly meetings are generally pretty small and pretty laid back until you get to the point you're looking at actually trying to do action items. Good chance part of the members will end up going to Ireland at some point in time. Ireland's pretty good about supporting Wyoming legislators and Wyoming people that are there to forward joint type causes. For those of you that know, last summer, the president of the Senate of Ireland came to Frontier Days and rode in the parade, and he's been to Wyoming, I would guess, a half dozen plus times, and I think he intends to be back again in the next year. And they take it really seriously. For us, it's kind of a reach out. For them, it's very serious about them figuring it out. And by the way, they probably can teach us a thing or two. They've run into many hundreds of billions of dollars of trade off an island that doesn't have very many people.
Other questions for the presenter? Other questions? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the fiscal note, I was gathering that the council was the business council, and that it was tasking the business council with providing the administrative support. And that might not be accurate, but that, I think, was what I was getting out of the last page of the fiscal impact and non-administrative impact, where it lists Wyoming Business Council as having an obligation each year. Is that accurate, or am I misunderstanding?
Mr. Chairman, on Senator Rothfuss, on page 8, yeah, it kind of goes into how it's paid for. The staffing from the business council, I actually did not catch. I didn't read the fiscal footnote good enough. But I think the business council, the actual support that it shows there is for travel for non-legislative members. I believe that's where part of those funds for the governor's office comes from. I see a supportive services cost of $11,026. I will track that down for you. I do not have a good answer for it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and so on the last page of what we have, and I don't know if you've got the same fiscal note in front of you, but it says the WBC estimates that new clerical and administrative duties would add about 40 staff hours per quarter, or 160 staff hours per year, and then it was based off of that. So that was where I was extrapolating that council might mean business council there. And again, I don't know. That would be reasonable. I think that's a.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yeah, I just managed to pick that up and hadn't done that. They hadn't contacted me on it.
Okay.
I would guess the 40 is more than generous to start with. It might not be later. Those early meetings, I can tell you I've sat in on a couple. I am the one of the co-chairs of the Irish American Caucus. Those meetings are pretty pretty social and informal to start with as a whole. So I don't expect a huge start. If we're actually, it's like a lot of our other investments, if we're actually doing projects and doing things, I'm guessing the load will increase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the presenter? Other questions? Hearing none, thank you, Senator Driscoll, for your testimony.
Thank you. One
Thank you
last-
for the bill.
Make sure all the co-sponsors vote yes, please.
We know who's going to present this on the floor, Senator Driscoll.
I don't know, Anderson Cooper on that.
We're just volunteers. We're just volunteers. Anyone else from the public like to speak on Senate File 144? And they spring up all over the place.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Senator Dockstader.
I know we got enough co-sponsors and all, but I come to the question, why haven't we been doing this before? We've reached out to the Pacific Rim. We've reached up to a Canadian province. I commend the good senator from up in Devil's Tower for putting this together. We should be doing more of this. I think there's opportunities left untapped unless we start to do more of this. So full support of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good, thank you. Any questions for Senator Dockstader?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Ron Goldberg, the Strategic Partnerships Director for the Wyoming Business Council. May I proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
In answer to Senator Rothfuss's question, yeah, we did supply LSO with a fiscal note with the approximately 40 hours per quarter or 160 hours annually was kind of based as best we could on what it takes to run our quarterly business council board meetings. So as Senator Driscoll said, we'll get this, assuming we go down this path, we'll get this launched and then kind of see what but that was our best estimate. We think if we go down this path, this commission approach is a good opportunity for greater collaborative work and learning, and everybody learning from each other, from the legislators on the commission to other partners such as Manufacturing Works, for example. Over the hill, the university, they have an office that, I don't know about proper nouns, but engages globally, shall we say. And we've developed a relationship with them. And so I think it's a good opportunity through a commission to look at what potential opportunities there are here, from targeted markets to Wyoming businesses interested in doing business over there to what ones may be doing business now. We had one company mentioned a few minutes ago. And from the education and cultural standpoint. So I would say that we expect the long haul. If we have any experience with the Taiwan office, we open an office there. It is a long game. And we've learned so much the past few years. You try some things, you test some theories, you find businesses that are interested, and whether they can fulfill once you get working with a distributor in a foreign country, at least in the Taiwan experience, it's go, go, go. And is a business in Wyoming, a lot of small businesses, are they able to fulfill those contractual obligations repeatedly? We've had some small successes, but it is a long game with, so far, a bit of a low return, but a lot's happening and stuff culturally and educationally too. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Goldberg? Yes, Senator.
So getting back to the question that I was asking Senator Driscoll about, you are also of the assumption that on page 5, line 8, on this H paragraph, necessary clerical and administrative support for the commission shall be furnished by the council. You are the council. That's how you read it?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that's how we read it when we
right.
got a fiscal note request from LSO.
Seems
So
fair, thank you.
We thought we were in the game.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Goldberg? Other questions? Yep, go ahead, Jones. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Goldberg, do you think this could possibly morph also into travel and tourism partnership or something along those lines as well?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, that's a good question. I probably should have mentioned that too. I think there are potential opportunities there. That's why I like, I should say, we like this kind of commission approach. I think we're all going to learn a lot, and we're going to have maybe expedited connections with partners in collaboration, if that makes sense. So definitely.
Other questions? Other questions? Hearing none? Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Other testimony?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name's Dennis Ellis, and I'm testifying today as a Wyoming citizen, but also a U.S. citizen and a Republic of Ireland citizen. So I gained my dual citizenship back in COVID when we all sat around with nothing to do. I went down some rabbit holes and figured that out. I've spent the last 7 years, I just recently departed Microsoft, but worked out of the office of the president there. And if I were to describe to you a place that I said was, hardworking and agricultural backing and roots, and it had a low tax environment, and it was getting into burgeoning technology, you'd think I'm speaking about Wyoming, and that'd be true, but it's also the exact same true of Ireland. We're very similar in that way. I was able to go with Microsoft last year for several weeks to help lead an AI skilling event all across rural Ireland. And in many of those places, you could be on an island. I was on Inishbofin with 180 people live on this island, learning how to use AI to improve their tourism opportunities. It's literally like you took Wright, Wyoming, and plopped it down in the middle of Ireland. The people are the exact same. They face the same challenges economically. I know some folks might look at this and not see how we would open lines of trade, but if you think of like the Ukrainian war, where all of Europe has starved themselves of any Russian gas. That's an entirely gigantic market that the United States should fill and give them domestic energy security. Ireland is the jumping off point for most of the global tech companies that are headquartered in the United States. They set up shop in Dublin, and that's their jumping off point for all of Europe and the Middle East. And so I think Microsoft has 4,000 to 5,000 FTE serving in Dublin, and they're the largest taxpayer going back and forth with Apple. In Laramie County, they're approaching 2,000 FTE, and they're the largest taxpayer in this county. So there's a lot of similarities, but I would say the areas that it would be most exciting to me, and my family, put down fishing poles in Cork County and came to Natrona County to be sheep herders and learn how to ride and, learn a whole new way of life 150 years ago. What I see that's most exciting beyond agriculture, which is always a great area for us to open markets, we have two of the most innovative places, I would say, that you all have been a part of, and certainly Senator Rothfuss is in the cryptology area. I'm a huge Bitcoiner and have been in that space for quite some time. The innovations we've done are being copied by every state in the country. You all know this. And to the extent that industry begins to mature under President Trump, it's exciting to think of, having Speedies set up here. Ireland has a massive financial sector, and what sort of opportunities we could open for those markets that are a new one for Wyoming. And then very burgeoning is our efforts, even Senator Cooper has a bill on nuclear innovation. And as we face, with the massive build out of data centers and the huge tax we're gonna have on our electrical grid, I don't mean a monetary tax, but just it's gonna be hard to meet that need. Quite the same in Ireland. They're building tons of data centers. They're very much more focused on renewable energy standards. And it's going to be, I don't know how that's going to work out, because you're not going to be able to build enough solar and wind to staff these data centers with power. And so with our nuclear innovations, particularly micronuclear, it's very exciting to think that Wyoming may be leading that space in the coming years. And we have trade lines opened up with Ireland that we can more quickly help bring that type of technology to market. So with that, I know you all need to get back to the floor, but I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Ellis? Questions? So you're related to the Natrona County Ellises?
Pinky's my uncle, yes, sir.
Pinky?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes. And
So Sean is your cousin?
Yes, sir. And then Senator Rothfuss and I went to Natrona County High School together.
Oh.
He was in the smarter classes than I. It wouldn't surprise you.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Pinky Ellis's relative?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for your testimony. Anyone else in the room would like to talk about Senate File 144? Hearing none, there's no one on Zoom. We'll close public testimony, and what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Rothfuss, seconded by Jones. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Yes.
Just very briefly, I think, this is one of those elbow grease bills. It'll pay off if the folks work hard. And I know that Senator Driscoll has been engaged in this for quite a while and trying to build this relationship. So look forward to seeing how things turn out. But it certainly offers a lot of opportunity for very low risk, other than the time of the folks that are engaged. So appreciate the bill.
Going to be a big job. Going to be a big job. Any changes, any amendments? I have one amendment on page 5, line 8. I want to change that to the business council. And just add business before council.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Wyoming Business Council or just Business Council?
Yes, that's a good point. Wyoming Business Council. Good point. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Got a second from Cooper? Any discussion? The Wyoming Business Council. I think that was the intent of the maker. He just didn't put it in there is all. Hearing none, sensing you're ready to vote, all in favor of the Wyoming Business Council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That carries. You got that, Sue, what we wanted to change there? It's interesting here, in the fiscal notes, on the one page, it's per diem and mileage for 6 legislators appointed by the commission. And then on the second page, it's salary per diem and mileage for the legislative commission members. I wonder if that really is in 2 places on the fiscal notes, or they just, because the dollar amounts don't coincide. But it seems funny we got 2 fiscal notes. It's in this verbiage, and then it's in this verbiage over here. And maybe one was done by Tempe and one was done by somebody else. I don't think it's any problem for the bill, but it's just interesting that it's in 2 places. All right, any other discussion? Any other discussion? Hearing none, sensing the body's ready to vote, I think we'll do a roll call on this good little bill.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for Senate File 144. Senator Cooper.
Aye.
Senator Jones. Aye. Senator Nethercott.
Excuse.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Chairman Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 excused.
That bill, Senate File 144, has squeaked by the Minerals Committee. Who's going to do that on the floor? Senator Driscoll?
Yeah, he's going to.
Senator Driscoll is going to do the floor. Yes.
And I just dug into statute. We actually don't need our standing committee amendment. We already did it, so we'll have to take it to the floor, but we can kill it. It's defined under definitions in 912-102. When they say council, it means the Wyoming Business Council. And that was the reason why it wasn't more explicit. So it's in context in statute. It makes sense, even if it doesn't make sense as we're reading through the bill. So
Okay.
we just,
So we'll have to kill the
we
standing
just kill it.
committee?
Exactly, yeah. No big deal.
Okay. All right. And with that, we are finished. At 1:35, the Senate Minerals Committee is finished, adjourned.